Welcome to the Black Agenda Podcast. I'm your co-host, Adrian Guest, along with my co-host, Devin Dito. And today we're going to be bringing you another edition of our weekly roundup. But before we get to our news, we really wanted to start off by just recognizing that we've lost over 200,000 of us. I mean, 200,000 plus Americans have died due to the pandemic. We had over the weekend the little slogan, Trump lied, 200,000 plus died. And there's been no conversation about that this week. So we just wanted to make sure to open that up because there's been a lot of, people that, that we may love and know that we've lost. I don't have anybody in my family, but there's a lot of people who may be watching today who've lost someone or know someone. So we just really wanted to highlight that because that's an important moment in our history and we want to commemorate their lives. So to just get in a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today, one of the biggest things that happened over the week, Devin, was the Breonna Taylor decision. We got, from the Kentucky Attorney General, a lot of different statements that were made that, in my opinion, seem more like a defense for the law enforcement rather than just trying to adjudicate the law and say what actually happened. But just to kind of start, whenever you look at the charges, there's actually no one being charged for the death of Brianna. When you look at that press conference that they had, Devin, her name wasn't really even mentioned, other than him saying that, oh, it was a tragedy and criminal law doesn't really help to address tragedies. But what they're really being charged for, Devin, is charges for endangering others in the apartment complex. One, endangerment, which is, I find very ridiculous the fact that the charges don't even recognize any endangerment to Brianna. I mean, or her boyfriend. I mean, it's not even, they unloaded into her apartment and they never even addressed those issues, but they rather would say, hey, these other people who I think may have been white, from what Ben Crump was saying, we're going to press charges saying that you endangered these lives. But Devin, they're not going to address Brianna's life. So that viewers, that's where we're going to start today. Just kind of going over this a little bit. So Devin, I'll let you pick up off of that.
It's it's disappointing that out of all the things to charge him with, they chose wanton endangerment. Technically nobody was charged for killing her. So nobody has been charged for killing her. She was shot. I think the district attorney, the Daniel Cameron may have said 5 times. We've heard 6 times, but nobody is going to pay the price for that. And I watched the announcement, and like you say, it really just seemed more of a defense of what had happened rather than, trying to make sure that someone, we got justice for Brianna. I understand that seems more of a movement type, and he tried to, to say that the criminal justice system doesn't work to get to work for movement. It's rather focused on, supposed justice. But I mean, you see, as far as her boyfriend who was there with her, we only have one person. Of all the people in this neighborhood, we have one person that said that the police announced themselves at her door. Her boyfriend, who was there with her, Mr. Walker, said that he didn't know who it was coming in. He thought they were being robbed. He shot one time, and apparently that was enough, according to Daniel Cameron, Kentucky Attorney General, for them to just unload on Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor. And I didn't understand the story. I'm trying to imagine them in the hallway in an apartment. Kenneth Walker standing there with his gun. He shot once. Breonna Taylor, I guess, is standing next to him. Not sure she wasn't armed, but they still, managed to shoot her. And they charged the person, Brett Hankinson is the officer that was charged with wanton endangerment. He got, he's outside the apartment shooting through a window. And that's how it, shooting bullets, and those bullets went into the other apartment. That's what he was charged for. Otherwise, the rest of the cops, as Daniel Cameron said, were justified in their shooting only because Kenneth Walker shot first, and he shot Officer Mattingly. Now, there is some discrepancies and some controversy around whether or not the bullet that actually shot Officer Mattingly was from Kenneth Walker's gun. We've talked about it, off the air, but Daniel Cameron's, schedule of events and what the family's attorney, Ben Crump, was saying don't really match up. And so one of the big things, of course, is who shot Officer Mattingly. If it wasn't Kenneth Walker, then, they essentially unloaded on him for nothing. And they killed Breonna Taylor in the process, and nobody's going to pay the price for that. The other thing is that we don't know if Daniel Cameron even tried to bring charges against the other officers, because this was a grand jury and it was some secrecy surrounding this. And so Ben Crump, the family's attorney, has asked for the release of the transcript from the grand jury proceedings. And Daniel Cameron was asked at his press conference whether he brought charges against the other officers, and he declined to even answer, yes or no. And so it leads you to kind of believe that, Adrian, this may not have even brought up, this didn't even make it to the grand jury, even thinking about charging these other officers for the murder of Breonna Taylor. This may not have even made it there. And I don't know if we'll ever know, even though the governor has asked for the evidence to be released, the family's attorney is asking for the transcript. I don't know if Daniel Cameron will do that, and if we'll ever get an answer as to whether, he even tried to get charges against the other officers.
And I don't know. We may not ever know that. And whenever you this, I think they were talking on MSNBC about kind of one endangerment, and they're basically saying that that's like if someone were to maybe just go outside and shoot up in the air. It's completely ignoring that there was a life loss. Breonna Taylor, I mean, she's no longer with us. I mean, these charges don't even scratch the surface to address that, nor does it really address the issue that there was no medical care given to Brianna. I mean, she laid there. I can't recall, but I believe it was 20 minutes or so. But she laid there with no medical care. And,
Mute myself. Uh, by saying that the way that the wound that Breonna Taylor, where she was shot at, essentially, that within a minute or two, she was deceased, and that the officers, it really, basically he gave them the excuse that when she was shot, she essentially died almost immediately, and there was no time for them to give her, care and try to, get her to stay alive until the ambulance got there. So I did want to make sure that we put that out there, that Daniel Cameron tried to go at that point also by saying that the way she was shot, I forget where she was shot at, the fatal wound anyway, that where she was shot at, it was fatal, and within a couple of minutes she was dead.
more, I guess, flame to what's going on and why they've kind of asked, for an additional 500 Kentucky National Guard members to come and kind of help with the situation. I mean, basically, Dad, what you have, I mean, I get that, Daniel Cameron isn't wanting to bend the law to fight a cause or fight for a movement here. But what you have here is so many facts that don't add up. What you have here with this grand jury secrecy, I mean, again, going back to the point you said, we have no clue what the prosecution team said to educate the jurors over the charges that they could have taken. Did they even talk about Breonna Taylor? Because if you're not even going to say that one of those charges is for even at least endangering her life, if you don't even want to talk about taking her life, at least talk about the fact that you did shoot into her apartment. But they don't even want to do that. Daniel Cameron wants to play into this law and order message. I mean, one of the things, viewers, you got to remember, whether or not, this goes to his beliefs. I mean, he did speak at the RNC convention this year. Fortunately, he did, mention Breonna Taylor's name. I don't think anyone else did. But whenever you look at that sort of, I don't know, that sort of playing to party line, and you look at what, Donald has been saying about this law and order message, this just seems like a moment to where the law was on the side of Breonna Taylor, but for some reason, the prosecution played a little too friendly to their buddies, the law enforcement, and kind of wanted to protect them rather than just state the facts. Because if you look at it, I mean, if you look at this no knock warrant, which is what they were talking about, well, now they're saying that they announced themselves. Well, with the no knock warrant, you wouldn't have to announce yourself. I mean, if you look at Kentucky's stand your ground law, if Mr. Walker thought that he was being threatened, then Kentucky law says he can use self defense. I mean, it's just so many different things that don't add up. It's one of these things where you want to say, well, if it was a white family or another family, would it be different? And it just seems that it's always a case with black and brown people that we can't get justice for us. It's got to be two different systems of justice. And I don't know, Devin. He already, Daniel Cameron said there's not going to be any additional charges. He's hinted at the fact that don't expect anything additional. He's hinted at the fact that we don't need to let anybody like us or Hollywood or any sort of activist influence, how Kentuckians feel about what's going on. But we see how they feel. I mean, we see the protests. We see all of unfortunately, we see the violence and the riots. I mean, we know that city is hurt. I mean, we know that the family is hurt. He talked about the conversation that he had as a difficult conversation. how could Devin, I mean, how could you go to a family and say, I'm sorry, the officers were justified in killing your daughter, your loved one, even though who they were supposed to be going for was already in custody? I mean, it's how do you even have a conversation like that? Keep a straight face, and he tries to talk about, well, if he would have been killed, how his black mom would just try to throw into that and play into that. But Daniel Cameron, you had an opportunity to show people that you were going to be on the right side of the law, but instead you chose to do something different, and now you're choosing to cover and hide and not let us know how you got to it. And I would say, viewers, he can get to whatever side he wants, but at least let us see how you get there, so we can know that Breonna Taylor got some justice.
Exactly. And I think, this is not going to stop the protest, and I don't think he expected it to. Um, but this it's not really justice, because I don't know how much time one Brett Hankinson has to be charged first and convicted, and then we'll see if he actually serves time, because it's such a minor offense. He may not serve that much time in jail for this. And so the movement continues, the struggle continues, because this is not justice. I don't think, just charging one officer, you get the headline, yes, one officer was charged, but this is not the justice that we needed or wanted. And, the struggle will continue. There will be more protests, and there may be more riots, because the system is still not responding to what the folks who live in this country want. And as long as that is the case, we will continue to see folks in the street pushing for change until we get the system to respond the way we need it to, and to enact justice, and uphold the fairness of, just because you're a cop doesn't mean it's impossible to charge you and convict you. You can make mistakes. We're not advocating to demonize all cops. There were two cops shot in Louisville the night that this decision was announced, and so that's a tragedy. We don't want that, but at a certain point, if the system doesn't respond to the people, then you're going to get more violence, because the people feel as though the system is not hearing them. It's not responding to them. So they're going to figure out ways to get your attention. So hopefully, eventually, we have an election coming up. Daniel Cameron is elected. It's not a sure all if we vote in a Democrat that it's really going to change, but we can try. We can vote them all out and get people in there who care. Your attorney generals, your sheriffs, your mayors, all those folks. We have the power to control who gets in those positions. So the struggle moves on, and we're going to continue talking about this as well. We're going to be hosting our own live discussion on Facebook and YouTube. We had one this past week talking about cuties and that, the controversy surrounding that. And we want to talk about this Breonna Taylor case and get people's thoughts. So if you want to talk with us live on Facebook and YouTube, it'll be next Thursday, October 1st at 7:30 p.m. DM us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Black Agenda Pod. Let us know if you want to participate. It'll be live. You can come on, give us your thoughts, and we'll have some topics that we'll put at people. We really want to know what you think, and how do we get the change that we need, so we don't get these half justices with somebody getting charged, but not for the death of her, but for endangering other people. So with that, we're gonna take our first break. Adrian, you got any last thoughts though before we move on into our break?
Viewers. So we really hope that y'all can participate in this. We would love to hear your thoughts. This is going to be an ongoing case for sure. So definitely be on the lookout and participate.
All right. So with that, we're going to take our very first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the big news of the week and of today. President Trump has named, or is going to name, Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, or at least nominate her to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. So when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about that and what that means for the 2020 election. So stick with us, and we're going to be right back. All right, welcome back. So, like I said before the break, we're going to kind of dig into the really big news of the week, which is that President Trump has pretty much announced and picked Amy Coney Barrett to fill the Supreme Court seat that was left behind by the now late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away at age 87. And so, Adrian, this is going to be a point of contention between Democrats and Republicans. This will be President Trump's third nomination for the Supreme Court, and this will effectively, for decades here on out, leave the court 6-3, really in favor of conservatives. He nominated in the past Neil Gorsuch, and then of course we all remember Brett Kavanaugh and what happened with that. But this is really unprecedented to get three picks, over the course of one term, and it seems as though, we were hoping and maybe thinking that some Republicans were gonna, stick to what they said in 2016, and not go along with nominating and trying to confirm a Supreme Court justice during an election year, but that is not the case. People like Mitt Romney has come out and said he's going to vote for the nominee. I think Senator Murkowski has said she isn't, but everyone else, Doug Jones from Alabama also said he isn't, but you would need a few more senators, Republican senators, to come out and say no for this thing to get blocked up. The Democrats do not have the votes just by themselves, and so and this is according to the Hill. They're already planning. They have a date. October 12th is when they're thinking of starting the 4-day hearing for Trump's nominee for Amy Coney Barrett. So this thing is moving right along. We're looking at mid-October having a confirmation, of a new Supreme Court justice right before Election Day. And this is really throwing Democrats, up in arms, animated, and it may whip up more Democrats to show up at the ballot box for sure. So, Adrian, I don't know how much more news we need. Pair this with debates, a Supreme Court justice hearing, all happening during an election. It's going to be quite a month of October, and I don't know how we're going to make it through.
Yeah, Derek, we'll have to figure out what stories we'll have to talk about. But this is I get it. I mean, it's one of those things that which we'll talk about a little bit more. I get the whole the campaign strategy that the Trump team is having with this. Um, it's sad that we're doing this because I mean the hypocrisy from the Republicans, and I get viewers both sides are the same way. But I mean, you literally have people like Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, who come out so strongly in 2016, just saying that we're not gonna do this for Obama. I'm not gonna give them a chance. And I think President Obama was about 200 days away from the versus Trump was about 40 days from the election. I mean it's just clearly the Republican Party has tied themselves so heavily to Donald Trump that whatever he says goes, whatever he wants to do, they're going to just follow suit. Even the decent Republicans like Mitt Romney, who were somewhat admirable during the impeachment trial, they're starting to cave into that political pressure by saying, well, I mean, he said he would vote based on their merits, but if you go back to all these statements, they didn't even want to give anybody, they didn't want to give Merrick Garland a vote based on merits. They didn't want to entertain it at all. So whenever people get frustrated by maybe the Democratic Armageddon option that they're kind of calling, I mean, I see why they're trying to do that because you've got a Supreme Court who would have a 6-3 majority conservative. People that's a lifelong position. I mean, you don't realize, Brown versus Board of Education, that was, yeah, I mean, she's 48. That's 40. I mean, she could have so many years. I think the average life expectancy is about 80, 85 for females. I mean, no slight against her, but when you look at the power that the Supreme Court has, it's nice when you've got a pretty mixed, balance of justices rather than having it swayed to one side. Because, like I said, Brown versus Board of Education, Roe v. Wade, all of these things, work their way up to the Supreme Court, and they have a say. I mean, even the Affordable Care Act. I mean, that's something that could, is on its way up to the Supreme Court. And if you get someone who says, "I don't like that," think about all the people who have pre-existing conditions. Think about the millions of people who now have coronavirus as a pre-existing condition. I mean, I don't, Devin, I think we're going to do a special episode on civics, but I don't think people realize how important it is to pay attention to the judicial branch. I mean, all these federal judges that Trump has put in, the two that he's already gotten, the potential one that he might get. I mean, these have ramifications. So that's why when you have, Senator Chuck Schumer saying that, we're going to have our Armageddon option, we're going to, get rid of the filibuster, we'll expand the justices to 11, we'll, give DC and Puerto Rico statehood. These are just ways, viewers, to protect the democracy. You can have whatever opinion you want about Donald Trump, but I will give you my valid opinion, and he's ruining our democracy. And these steps that the Democrats are trying to take are really to preserve our democracy and try to fix, these 4 years. I mean, you look at it from, our favorability rates on the world stage to the civil war that we're having within our country. He's ripped away what we have known as America. So these steps that the Democrats are taking are just ways to get us back to where we were before. So yeah, you can believe in this justice if you want, because I get the whole idea of being pro-life and supporting at conception, but this is going to have a lot more ramifications than just the pro-life argument. So we've really got to buckle down and look at this, because again, if you're going to say one thing for President Obama, but now you've got your Republican president in office, I think that we got to be talking about that and talking about, like Devin said, she's 48 and it could have a long time. I mean, almost longer than she's been alive, on the bench. I mean, that's just kind of ridiculous to be going through this, Devin.
Yeah, I mean, it's, essentially, not to dramatize it too much, but essentially the Affordable Care Act, Roe v. Wade, things dealing with voting rights, all those things are on the ballot. Gun rights, all that is on the ballot come November, because you're talking about a 6-3 decades long stranglehold that conservatives will have on the Supreme Court. Now, I don't think Democrats will take this Armageddon option, but should the Democrats win the White House, possibly retake the Senate, and they have the House already, you're talking about, from top to bottom, the government being run by Democrats, and they very well could try to expand the court, add DC and Puerto Rico, and give them statehood. And so one of the interesting things as to why Republicans and Donald Trump are trying to push this justice through is that it seems as though he is counting on the fact that the election could be contested because of mail-in voting fraud, as he's been talking about this entire time. And he's, in his folks' mind, they're preparing for the possibility that the Supreme Court could get involved in determining the winner of the election, like we had back in 2000 when Bush v. Gore ended up in the Supreme Court. He's hoping to rush through a nominee, get them in there, get a conservative advantage on the court, and have them potentially deciding the winner of the 2020 election. And so that is his plan, I believe. He stated this week, talking about mail-in voting and how it's a mess with the ballots and we need to, quote, get rid of the ballots. That's the plan. And so to me, the last thing before we move on to the next topic is that the importance of voting. You stated it. The importance of voting. We're getting the repercussions for not voting in 2016. Unfortunately, a lot of people did sit at home. They voted third party. I get it. They wanted to choose the lesser of two evils. We gave Donald Trump 3 Supreme Court picks. That could have been Hillary Clinton. And it makes me cringe every time I think about where we could have been in such a different place. Yes, I didn't really like Hillary. You don't have to like her, but she was so much better than the alternative. And here we are. Trump is on his 3rd Supreme Court nominee. And I just think back to 2016 when folks said, I don't like either one. I'm going to sit at home. This is what you get, So, yes, Democrats can be upset, but a lot of them stayed home in 2016. So you kind of reap what you sow. So maybe come November 3rd, we'll actually show up and ensure that this doesn't happen again. And Donald Trump is removed from office. Not that Joe Biden's going to really, structurally change anything. But we could, if there is an opening that comes up under his administration, we could assume that they would be for things like Roe v. Wade and of the Affordable Care Act and gun gun control and things of those natures. But that's all plays into Donald Trump's plan of sowing confusion in the election. The other story we'll move to now is that Donald Trump was asked this week about would he commit to a peaceful transfer of power, and I think he's just kind of toying with the media, and they always take the bait for stuff like this. I get it. He didn't say yes. I'm going to commit to a transfer of power, but when has he ever said yes? You know, and so he was asked this week during his press conference, would he commit to a peaceful transfer of power? And he was like, well, we'll see. We'll see what the results look like because there's so much voter fraud. And so, I think Trump is just drumming up so much confusion. You really don't know what to think. He's disparaged mail-in voting. He's talked about Joe Biden and Democrats trying to rig it. He's trying to blame Russia. I mean, not Russia, but China and other people trying to affect the election. So Adrian, he's really setting the stage for when it comes election night. If we don't have the results that night, you will see probably a very strong campaign coming out from Donald Trump's people and his campaign saying that the results are rigged. There's widespread voter fraud, even though there may not be any evidence of it.
Devin, the terrible part is the fact that we kind of already know that on November 3rd, we probably won't just have all results because a lot of those are going to be mail-in ballots, and some of them can't even get start counting until election day. So it's. I mean, kind of to go back to the statement that he made, we've talked a little bit in the past about Trump making jokes and how he doesn't really joke about these things. I mean, some people maybe say that he joked about downplaying the virus, but we see based on the actions, we see based on the death count, based on the case rate, his jokes add up to real things. So I don't know if this is a joke or if this is something that's going to add up to real things, but we do have a former top aide to Mike Pence that said that there were staffers that had private conversations about this topic. So whether it's a joke or not, or whether it's a serious, we've got some staffers talking about it. But to take it even a step further, Devin, Trump and his goons are really just trying to steal the election away from us viewers. We know that the Constitution, and in case you don't know, the Constitution gives state legislatures the power to choose their own electorates so that those electorates, vote for our president. That's kind of how the Constitution works. Doesn't do the popular vote, unfortunately. But the essence of our democracy has always been that states allocate their electors based on the popular vote of their state so that we kind of have a pseudo essence in picking our president. Well, Donald thinks that instead of doing that, let's just go back to what the Constitution says literally and say, well, if we have Republican, led legislature, let's stack our electorates with, Donald Trump friendly people so that we can ensure no matter what the popular vote of our state says, our electors are going to go for Donald Trump. And I mean, viewers, we have to think about that. I mean, that's literally taking away our voices, taking away our power. I mean, I think in essence, we should, abolish the electoral college and have just a popular vote because the president leads everybody. It's not about a party or anything like that. But when you even think about it further, think about your local elections. Think about your state elections because it's not just Donald Trump on the ballot. I mean, it's a lot of other people who are running for office here. So when you're trying to say, get rid of the ballots, I mean, are people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell not thinking about their ballots? I mean, what is going on, Devin? I mean, you literally have a guy who's telling us, don't trust the elections. He's trying to harm the Postal Service. He's trying to pretty much have a coup within different states. I mean, you have a report where the Pennsylvania legislature, they're actually, been talking to the Trump campaign. Their chairman is, talking about, they're having these sort of conversations already. So, Devin, to go back to what you said, if he's joking about this, he might be joking about the whole not, doing the peaceful transition of power. But as far as this whole notion of him trying to kind of steal the election and pretty much make it to where he's going to have 4 years again, no matter what the American people says, that seems to not necessarily be a joke as much.
No, it's definitely not. I think he definitely toys with the media a little bit because he knows they'll take the bait. But I do believe if Donald Trump was winning in the polls today, you would not see the rhetoric we hear about mail-in voting and not accepting the results. He would be touting the fact that he is leading in every single poll, and we need to accept the results, and that needs, we can't go around them and things like that. And it's weird to me that he claims the election, like in 2016 he said it was rigged, it's rigged, and then he won. So did you win off a rigged system? Are you an illegitimate president because of that? And then here we are again in 2020. If he says it's rigged, it just so happened if he wins, does that mean again that you won off a rigged system? I don't understand the play here, because he's trying to thread the needle of saying, well, mail-in voting is fraud. There's a lot of fraud in mail-in voting, yet he's advertising to folks in states like Florida to tell them to vote by mail or vote by absentee, while in the same breath telling people that there's so much fraud in mail. It doesn't make sense to me, because he could be turning off his own people from voting by mail, which in theory would hurt him. In places like Pennsylvania, where it's very close, or in Florida, if just a percentage or two of his base that voted for him in 2016 says, well, I'm not going to vote by mail, and they don't vote at all, you could end up with him losing it, and it's his own fault. So, joke or not, no joke, to me the strategy electorally doesn't make any sense. I don't get it politically. But, that's why I say the strategy does not make any sense. Republicans historically have voted more than Democrats when it comes to mail-in voting, and yet mail-in voting is the very thing he's attacking. And if you ask Republican leaders in states, particularly in swing states, where Republicans do have a lot of the state, like secretaries of state and governors, if you ask them, they'll tell you, no, mail-in voting is safe. We do this all the time. And yet you have the Republican president bashing it and criticizing it nonstop, which could lead to his own folks not showing up. It does not make any sense to me. But I think his purpose is to sow as much confusion and chaos as he can and start the campaign on November 4th to say, well, we don't have results. We can't trust those mail-in ballots. We can't trust those mail-in ballots. We don't have a result. It's November 5th. And I think that's what he's going to try to do. So we have to be prepared mentally. We will probably not get a result on November 4th. But if it happens to be a blowout, we could get a result on November 4th that it's a landslide. So that's the only way this is going to work out, is if it is a humongous referendum on Donald Trump, and it's a very wide margin to where you could say voter fraud, but it's not going to make up 6 or 7 points in a state if you lose by that much. So with that, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about coronavirus, because that is still a thing, people. Coronavirus is not magically going away. We're going to talk about Florida removing their restrictions, and then also some mixed messaging that we've gotten from the CDC. Some really strange things are going on there. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
viewers. So we want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the CDC. Last Friday, we saw where they had some statements talking about the coronavirus spreading airborne at a distance over 6 feet, meaning that indoor ventilation is really key if you're going to be having gatherings or maybe even meeting in bars and restaurants and things like that. However, this recent Monday morning, they kind of reversed those statements and almost pretty much watered down the language and said that first draft was a mistake. We even saw on the Rachel Maddow show where one of the protocols that the CDC put out for South Dakota meat packaging plant, they got watered down as well. I mean, they had recommendations saying you need to do this, this, and this, but instead the next draft had language that said, if possible or were feasible, to just suggest the recommendations aren't necessary. I mean, we've got the director, Dr. Redfield, who's really taken some heat, even within his own department, because reports suggest that a lot of employees have not liked his tolerance to pretty much cave into political pressure. I mean, Devin, these mixed messagings really are terrible. You even have a top aide to Vice President Pence that was on the coronavirus task force, Olivia Troy, that came out this week and said, Donald thought that the virus was good because he wouldn't have to shake hands with disgusting people. I mean, Devin, I don't know how you get more appalling than this. I mean, you already have the Woodward tapes talking about how he downplayed it. Now you've got literally a top aide who was in the room with him day to day working on the coronavirus, talking out against him, coming out and saying, I'm going to be voting for Joe Biden because we can't have another 4 years of this guy. I don't know what you think about that, Devin, but if that's not news enough for our viewers to say that this guy, is definitely, pretty seriously damaging our country, listen to Olivia Troy.
I mean, right. That's why it's so surprising and shocking that somebody who was in the rooms, when all of this was happening on that coronavirus task force, she saw firsthand how Donald Trump, was what he thought about the coronavirus and what he, how he responded. I'm not shocked. We had the story about what he said about the troops, calling them suckers and losers. Here he is saying he didn't want to shake hands with these disgusting people, even though they're the folks who voted for him. And it just seems as though our government institutions are no longer, expected to be objective. They're supposed to respond to political pressure from the president of the United States. That has never really happened like that before, where you have a president very blatantly putting his thumb on the finger and contradicting what the head of the CDC said. Like last week, we talked about how Robert Redfield said that, a coronavirus vaccine wouldn't be widely available until quarter 3 of 2021. And then you have Trump a few hours later saying, nah, he was confused. We're going to have it by April, putting a hard date on that. He has not followed the experts this entire time when it comes to coronavirus. And what it's done is really sown a distrust of what he says and what the government says, and the people who are the health experts like Dr. Fauci and Deborah Birx and Robert Redfield. People don't trust what they're saying because they're hearing two different messages. And to me, this is the worst thing that could happen when we're getting ready to get a vaccine and you're going to have Donald Trump cheerleading it, trying to rush it out as fast as possible. And you have health experts saying, we're going to take the necessary steps to make sure it's done correctly. The whole thing to me is just going to lead to a lot of people not getting that vaccine when it comes out, because they're just not going to trust, they don't trust Donald Trump's word. And that's been the problem through this entire thing, is that he has failed when it comes to at least just the messaging of the virus and what to do and what not to do and how seriously to take it. He has just not really cared about it, honestly. He just hasn't cared. And it's a virus that it disproportionately affects Black people, African Americans, Latinos. And it's surprising, but not surprising, when we have essentially a racist president not really care about a virus that's impacting Black and brown people disproportionately. So that's where we are. And I don't know how they're going to expect folks to, take a vaccine. So we're going to have some real problems. This is not going to go away at all. And, in that same thread of this not going away, but some people do think it is. You have in Florida now, Governor Ron DeSantis actually decided to lift all coronavirus restrictions when it comes to opening up businesses and going out and about. So they are essentially back to 100% full capacity. They're open as if the virus is over. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is a Republican, is a friend of Donald Trump, and of course, this is again something to help Donald Trump's numbers in Florida to say, hey, look, everything's returning back to normal. The problem with that is the virus is still here, and people don't forget that Ron DeSantis was out there in front of the media, bashing them because they were saying that Florida was going to get a bad outbreak because they weren't taking it really seriously, and they did see a spike in cases, and then it's come back down. It has receded, but he's allowing 100% capacity for everybody. It prevents anyone who is operating a business or who works for a business from not going to work because of emergency orders. And so that really puts a lot of states, I mean, not a lot of states, but a lot of counties and cities in a really weird position. Because even if your city is having a bad outbreak, the state is saying everything is open. So it's like, how are you going to enforce these rules when you have, it's what we have on a national level, on a state level. Mixed messaging, one person saying one thing, the other saying another. And the end goal, of course, is to get everything open, but do it safely. So I don't know what you think about that one, but I'm not shocked. It's Florida leading the charge. We're trying to open up early.
One thing that I guess viewers to help you think about it, let's look at the numbers. I mean, yes, since July they have gone down, but just yesterday they reported 2,800 plus new cases and 120 deaths. If you look at the ICU beds within Florida, there's really not many ICU beds left. There's several counties having ICU beds. In fact, only 3 of 4 of 67 counties actually have more than 100 ICU beds. So whenever you're trying to do these big Super Bowl-like experiences, open up at 100% capacity, I get it, viewers. Being quarantined is not that fun. We would love to have schools open full capacity, love to be able to go to movies and Six Flags, but there's people still dying. There's still, I mean, you talk to medical professionals, hospitalization rates are still really bad. ICU beds are very short. So this thing isn't really just going away. It's not like, Donald says that he's just going to be right at some point. We've got to get real about it. And we've got to make sure that, like Devin said, our institutions are led by facts and science, not by political pressure. So with that being said, we're going to take a quick little break, and then we're going to come back in because one of the things that Donald kind of unveiled was a platinum plan. And since we're the Black agenda, we want to talk about this platinum plan that he has for Black communities. So stick with us and we'll be right back.
All right, welcome back. So we're going to kind of get into, like Adrian said before the break, Donald Trump President Donald Trump announced yesterday, Friday, that he is unveiling a what he calls a platinum plan for Black America. So this is supposed to be his grand, agenda for Black America. And so just to kind of go over the highlights of it, on the top, it calls for $500 billion in access to capital in Black communities. It calls for 3 million new jobs for the Black community. It doesn't say how we're going to get them, but it just says that. It also asks for 500,000 new Black-owned businesses. And then it also, interestingly enough, was plans to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. It also plans to designate the KKK and Antifa as terrorist organizations. It says it wants to increase activity in opportunity zones. Don't really know what that means. And then it also, as far as education, plans to, they say close failing schools and then, really go all in on school choice and allowing folks to choose the school they want. So Adrian, I read the plan and it's really just a lot of words, but it doesn't really explain how we're going to get a lot of these things done. Specifically, you can't just I feel like sometimes they just throw random numbers out there and say, hey, we want to create 3 million new jobs, but we're not going to tell you how. And my question was, hey, what type of jobs, and are these going to be 3 million new jobs in addition to the millions we just lost in April that we're still waiting to get back? Black unemployment is still pretty high right now. A lot of people that are out of jobs, we still need to get them their jobs back. And then we're trying to create 3 million new ones on top of that, I would think. And, what kind of jobs are these? High paying? Are these factory? Like, what is this, for? But I feel like it's just really, you can call it what it is. It's pandering. Donald Trump has been in office for almost 4 years now. We're just now getting a Black agenda plan from Donald Trump. Like, did he just forget, that, hey, now I need your vote. Let me give you something. This is what politicians do. So.
Food here. I read through this here, and one of the things a couple of things it says safe urban neighborhoods with the highest policing standards. Remember, Black America, Donald doesn't want us in, the suburbs. He wants us in these urban communities. So he's basically trying to reinforce this idea that he's going to segregate us to these urban areas with the highest policing standards. But don't forget, his message has never been about policing standards. It's been law and order, looting, violence, shooters. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. So don't be swayed by that. When you talk about this better education and the school choice, if you really look at charter schools, they're not going to come into communities like, in my hometown of Webster County, Mississippi, because it doesn't make monetary sense for them like it does with a public school who is funded by the local community. When you talk about better health care, don't forget, viewers, he's trying to fight Obamacare. He's trying to strip away people's health care, strip away Medicaid expansion, strip away pre-existing conditions. So when you talk about all of these things, but you have people who are fighting, on the legal side to, undo these things, it doesn't make any sense to me to try to say you have a Black plan, you have a Black agenda for America, but on the other side, you've been doing all these other things. And really, the only thing you can tout is maybe the Second Step Act that you've done to help with a little bit of police reform. But that's not really anything you've done. I mean, it's just things that he's presided over. It's again, I understand Democrats and Republicans both do some pandering, but don't be fooled by this, viewer. This is clearly Donald just trying to get the vote of Black America. But again, how Devin said, how are you going to do these sorts of things? I get that this is an early unveiled plan, but if you're going to try to unveil something and call it the Platinum Plan, you better have a way to back it up. You better have some actual action behind this plan rather than some bullet points, which is what we see here.
Right, and I think that's so important to realize. I mean, and let's understand too, put this in context. We are not saying that Joe Biden just has this immaculate plan for Black America that he plans to enact. He will probably do the same thing. But where we are right now, we do have a very distinct choice. Like Adrian said, the way Trump talks about the suburbs and protecting the suburbs, he has never talked about the inner city that way. He has never talked about, oh my goodness, we need to protect the black mothers and the black housewives in the inner city. But he always talks about the white women in the suburbs, suburban women. He always talks about them when it comes to protecting them and giving them, areas where they don't have projects next to them. This man literally said that they don't want projects in the suburbs. Who is he talking about? He's talking about us. He wants to keep us in this very certain area. So I get it. When it comes to healthcare, there's not a lot in there. They said, I think in the plan, they wanted to invest in trying to find the causes and cures for things like diabetes and hypertension. That's been pretty well studied. We know the problem. Black people don't have grocery stores in their neighborhoods. They don't have good food to eat, good healthy food that's affordable. There was nothing about that in this platinum plan. There's nothing about addressing food deserts, addressing public transportation and trying to increase that in the inner city where we live and not have to, and we're seeing this now with the coronavirus. A lot of us are in these blue collar jobs that are essential. And so you don't see anything about raising the minimum wage. Literally, the first line of this plan is just talking about continuing the gains of, since 2019, where black people had the lowest unemployment rate they've ever had before. Well, how are you going to continue it? Like, that's not enough. A lot of this is saying, well, we're going to change this regulation and you might get the trickle down effects of better lending when it comes to minority owned businesses. Like, that's just, it's pandering. And we're smarter than that. And it's almost offensive to think he can just throw out a plan here a month before the election and we're just going to hop on the Donald Trump train. We're not stupid. We might vote Democrat all the time and not really get what we want, but we're not just going to run to Republicans for these, ridiculous plans that they try to throw out in bullet points and not really tell us what they're trying to do. So I think it's a failed attempt. He has a plan technically. I don't think it's going to work though.
Devin. And I mean, it just plays again into what he's trying to do, which is just win re-election. Ever since day one, Donald Trump's mission has been to win re-election, never been to fix anything or make America great again, which that doesn't mean anything. It's always been to win re-election. And to go to another story here, kind of in that realm maybe, and not to talk too much about Florida, but very interestingly, the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Monday announced a new law to kind of crack down on this violent, disorderly protesting with the Combating Violence, Disorder, and Looting and Law Enforcement Protection Act. I mean, it's again, viewers, Devin and I, Black Agenda, will definitely say we don't, support violence and looting and riots and different things like that. We would rather it be peaceful. But there are definitely a lot of pretty good penalties in here from, prohibiting harassing innocent people. I think one of the ones was if you come in out of state, you can have harsher penalties. And again, obviously, there's a lot of different things in here. Well, you can do your research, make your own opinions about it. But one of the things that we were really trying to highlight on this issue was kind of how Donald has really influenced certain governors to really go on this law and order message. And what we've seen in a lot of situations is when you try to have this huge crackdown, that really aggravates the situation when you're flooding. I mean, nobody wants to see military grade vehicles and National Guardsmen in their cities and things like that. We just want some justice and some peace. So I don't know, Devin, where this story is going to take us, and if this law that the governor has put in force is going to lead to less riots or things like that. But I do know if you want less riots or if you want more peaceful protesting, the best way to do it is just having some legislation to act upon what they're protesting about. So maybe start there.
That is the problem that we have with all of the things like this. This is my main problem with them. It's always law and order first. It's never, well, why are they protesting? What are they rioting about? Because black people and white people and Asian and Latinos are not going out there to riot just for the fun of it. Nobody enjoys that. But there's a reason behind it. And it always gets missed for the excuse of, well, we got to protect the suburbs and white people who may feel afraid in their homes. Like, that is not what you should focus on that. Yes, that's a problem. We're not condoning it. But why can't we fix the reason why these folks are even out there in the first place? Like, these are some pretty crazy penalties. Like, they could actually hold people in jail until their first court appearance if you get arrested in Florida, if you're at a violent protest is what they call it. You can be charged and criminally for blocking traffic. You know, we see that a lot with peaceful protests. You know, they'll go on like the highway and get in the way and block traffic to get folks' attention. And a lot of times that's the only way you can do it. You know, they also prohibit destroying any type of public property. I think they make it a felony there's actually a felony for blocking roadways. Literally a felony. They have enhanced penalties for people coming out of the state. You mentioned that. And then also, I think there's one in here where they make it a felony or some kind of a criminal thing if you, what they call assault a police officer, if you throw anything at them. I get it. We got to protect, you know, law enforcement and government buildings, but we're not fixing the problem. And as long as we don't do that, this is not going to stop the protesting and the occasional riots that come up. This is not going to fix it.
But, you know, when you think about the assault one, you know, you think about, I think the 70-year-old guy that the police officers pushed down and onto the pavement and his skull, you know, was bleeding out. Where was the felony charge against those officers?
Nowhere to be found. Nowhere. The police, I don't mean to speak out against police, but the police have kind of been given this blank check that if you feel somewhat threatened, that you can use just about any amount of force to get that person under control, as even you could kill them, and you're in the right because you felt that you were in danger at that moment. What excuse is there to push an old man over? He hit his head on the concrete and they just stood over him and watched him. You know, like what is you see a cop in New York in his SUV running over protesters. Like, what's the rationale for things like that? What's the repercussions for things like that? There are none. Nothing happens to them. They're almost untouchable. And I'm not, you know, they're people too. They make mistakes. We get it. But these riots and violence is not out of a lack of respect for police. It's that police represent a system that does not work. And it does not respond to what the people need. We've been saying this for years. These riots are not new. You go back to the 50s and 60s, we were doing the same thing. Like the riots in Newark started because the police officer beat up a cab driver. The police have been at the forefront of a lot of protests and rioting and inciting, you know, and being the spark that took everything off. So this is not going to fix it. It's just the wrong message to send. You could do this, and why can't we get legislation also right alongside of this is saying we're going to fix, you know, shooting people in the back when they're running away from you. We're going to do a Breonna Taylor law or George Floyd Policing Act or something similar to those things, in addition to stronger penalties on protesters and rioters. We can do two things at once, but it's, you know, like you say, Donald Trump and others believes this is the way to get reelected, is to make white America feel safe. And so that's what they're focused on. They're not focused on making sure our problems get solved. They're making sure that white people don't feel, you know, afraid and unsafe when we go out and make our voices heard.
And that's sad. That's, you know, you can play it however you want to, you know, to play it, viewers, but that's kind of the message that we're interpreting, and that's what you can gather out of, you know, the actions of this administration and the actions for a lot of his sycophants that for some reason care more about their political positions rather than their actual constituents. So we're going to take one last break, and then we're going to come back and do our quick hit section as always, where we'll leave you with some of the news you may or may not have gathered so you can be fully aware of what's going on. So sit back, listen well, and we'll be right back with you.
All right, welcome back. So we're going to kind of get into our quick hits, and like Adrian said, these are things you may have missed during the week that were going on around the country. So we kind of want to bring it to your attention. So of course, if you didn't know, the first presidential debate is going to be this upcoming Tuesday, I believe, the 29th. It's going to be held in Cleveland, and it's going to be hosted by Fox News journalist Chris Wallace, who is very good. And so it's going to feature about six different topics. These are supposed to be 15-minute segments. I don't know how they're going to stick with time with somebody like Donald Trump and a Joe Biden, who can kind of get off on tangents. But they're hoping to cover things like Trump and Biden's record, the economy, of course, the Supreme Court, COVID-19, and then what they call race and violence. I'm amazed that they put those two words together. But they're going to cover those, and then they're going to also talk about the integrity of the election. So, first presidential debate, September 29th, and then the second presidential debate will take place October 15th in Miami, and then the third one will come the week later, October 22nd in Nashville. And then I believe the vice presidential debate is October 7th. That's one right in between. And we'll get to see Kamala Harris face off against Vice President Mike Pence.
On to a little bit of news to talk about the election and polling places. Looks like the nation's two largest ride-sharing companies, Lyft and Uber, announced plans Tuesday to offer discounted rides to polling places and ballot drop boxes. So it's really nice to kind of see that. Lyft said users will receive a promo code valid on November 3rd for 50% off, up to a maximum of $10 for a one-way Lyft car or scooter ride, or a Lyft operated bike share ride to a polling place anywhere in the United States with Lyft service, including registered drop box locations for some voters who live in states that favor mail-in voting. So it's really nice that they're doing that. They're working with some nonprofit groups, including the Black Women's Roundtable, the National Federation of the Blind, and the Student Veterans of America to offer free rides. So again, be on the lookout for those things. If you don't have a way to get to the poll, hey, look at Lyft, look at Uber, and they'll give you a discount.
Right, and then our next story is going to be out of Mississippi. Big news here in the sports world. Former NFL player star Deion Sanders has been named the head coach at Jackson State University. And so Deion announced to the world on late Sunday evening, I think I was on Twitter when this actually broke, there had been a lot of rumors, but he finally announced it through his new podcast on Barstool called the 21st and Prime podcast. And then on Monday, he was at Jackson State to actually, give his first appearance and say that he will be the next football coach. He was, he came in with like this crazy entrance where there was like the band was playing, they had motorcycles, Escalades, you name it, they had it for his entrance. It was really grand. Definitely Deion Sanders coming to the building. And so everybody, I'm sure, is excited. This is huge for Jackson State. So we'll see what happens with that. And as far as a little bit of background on Deion, he's 53, and this will be his very first coaching job at the collegiate level. Before this, he was serving as the offensive coordinator at Trinity Christian here in Cedar Hill, Texas, not too far from me. And so he's going to finish the season before fully taking control on Jackson State. Of course, if you didn't know, the HBCU football season was canceled because of coronavirus, so we won't see Deion take the field with his team until 2021.
than actually listening to the facts and the recommendations from the intelligence community. So a lot of big news in that. Oh yeah. I could definitely do that for our viewers. So hey, just a little bit of quick bits on this. Over 500, or nearly 500 former military officials are endorsing Joe Biden. Many of these officials served in both Democratic and Republican administrations, and they're just basically saying, "Hey, Joe Biden is the guy. Donald is not the guy, so we need to really endorse him." The group is called National Security Leaders for Biden. We even have Robert Cardillo, which actually served under Donald Trump. He was a former intelligence agency director. He's actually served under six presidents, four Republican, two Democrats, where he said that Donald is a little bit too guided by the what's in it for him mentality rather than the recommendation from the intelligence community. So, Devin, there's just a lot, within this. Again, not to harp too much on Donald, but when you've got, career military officials who've served under both parties, saying that they're going to endorse one party where they've never really come out and publicly said these kinds of things, it's actually some pretty big news.
It is. I mean, anytime you can get 500 former military officials to get behind you, you're doing something right. But I think it does show this election really is a referendum on Donald Trump. Essentially, it's Joe Biden hasn't really needed to go out and say too much because folks really are voting for him because they don't like Donald Trump. So we'll see if it makes a dent. I think it's just I don't know how much his lead can expand, but I certainly think this will help to maintain it. With Trump's comments about soldiers coming out a few weeks ago, then you get a lot of military officers backing Biden. This is definitely a good thing. So with that, that's going to do it for our weekly roundup number 7. This has been another great conversation. I know we're during the football game, but if you didn't know, Mississippi State is down to LSU 24-20. So a little sports news there. It is close. That's good news. That means we won't be that bad this year, hopefully. New head coach, But yeah, so and so upcoming, we want to make sure we promote our next episodes, of course. If you don't listen to us, on things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you really need to. We have a very good podcast called The Black Agenda. You can search for it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Yeah, you can find us anywhere. Listen to it. We've got about 25 episodes now, so we got some really good stuff in there. And we got some upcoming stuff that's going to be really good. So we have on Monday or on Tuesday next week, we'll be talking to a reporter from the Charlotte Observer in North Carolina about, there were some reports about mail-in ballots particularly from black people being rejected at a higher rate than everyone else. So we're going to kind of talk to him and kind of dig into what's going on there. And then, of course, we talked about it earlier in the show, but next Thursday, we'll be hosting a live panel discussion about the Breonna Taylor case. It's going to include just regular everyday folks like me and Adrian. If you want to participate, you can message us and we'll add you on, let you come on. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think about the case, the other cases, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, and how you think we can, achieve the justice that we're looking for. And then we'll also be talking with Mary Frances Winters about her new book called Black Fatigue. And we'll be interviewing her on Wednesday, and that episode will be coming out the following week. And then we're also, of course, every Saturday at 4 o'clock, we'll be right here giving you the news from the past week. So make sure you subscribe to or follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to stay up to date. Make sure you don't miss out. So next Saturday at 4 o'clock, we'll be right back here. And Adrian, another good episode. A lot of news to get through, but we made it.
Yeah, exactly, Devin. And hey, viewers, don't forget, like, follow, share, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us at Black Agenda Pod. Wherever you want, just go at Black Agenda Pod. You can also donate to the cause, keep the fight going. You can go to patron.podbean.com/Black Agenda Pod. Again, patron.podbean.com/Black Agenda Pod. We'd love to be able to have your donations. We're looking to give scholarships. We're looking to help with nonprofits. We're looking to partner with legislatures to actually forward some policy rather than just bring you the news and talk about different issues with leaders. So yeah, Devin, another great episode. As always, thank you for all the work you do with putting this together. In case you don't know, viewers, Devin is really awesome about putting together this to make it look like it should be on CNN or something like that. So always got a shout out to Devin. And yeah, with that being said, viewers, we appreciate you. We look forward to checking out your comments. Look forward to having you participate in our live discussions. And as always, just catch us next time.